I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
Sup,
Sup, dog?
I guess. Sup dog is our crazy dog that decided he now enjoys the trampoline and would not get off the trampoline like a child earlier.
Running around with his ball in his mouth.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Anyways, welcome to our life. I know you showed up for a relationship podcast, and here we are talking about our $42 pound rescue that now enjoys the trampoline more than the kids.
Yeah,
He's out there playing by himself, jumping on the trampoline.
that was ridiculous. I told him to get off, and he just looked at me like, make me.
Uh-huh. He was not listening to you.
And then I come inside and I sit down, and you're like, I'll make your life better every day.
Yeah, I do. I make your life better every day. That's why you married me.
You're right.
See, that's the best thing, because if I say that, what do you say back to that? little tip, man, because here's the thing. If you can say with a straight face and full confidence to your wife that I make your life better every day that you wake up to me, what's she going to say? Either she's going to come back and be like, yeah, okay, right? And be all sarcastic. You can be like, it is what it is. It's the truth, right? Or she's going to be like, that's not true at all, da 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 da. At which point, she feels like a turd. Or she agrees with you. Either way, it's like a 3-way win for you.
I guess. I think I make your life better, and you just think that you make mine.
Nah, I improve your life all the time.
And I do yours also. Who is the most spoiled person in this relationship? You, by far. You can't even argue with that.
Hold on. Let's define spoiled. Because are we talking about the fact that you give me back rubs all the time? Or are we talking about the fact that my existence spoils your life?
No.
Anyways.
Oh, my Atlanta. I don't
What
even...
were we talking about? Oh, we came here to teach them something. So I actually wanted to talk about identity inside of your relationship. And this came up because the theme right now seems to be identity. We've been the guy that I co-lead our men's group with has been talking a lot about it, and really, I guess, hammering this point home in our men's group recently. And he's been making all these fantastic connections in relation to words creating your reality. And he, is actually at a event with one of our mentors right now. And he had sent me this picture of a cup that said, "Words shape your world." And what's really interesting about it is I also happened to record a video for our for the business side of the school that we are building. And essentially it was a video about what is communication renewal and how it's basically renewing and bringing out your identity, your true identity, and killing off this false identity, if you will, that you've built up throughout your entire life from your experiences and your memories and all these sort of things. And it got me thinking as we've continued to go down this rabbit hole. And then, a friend of me sends me this video. Friend to me.
Sounds
one
like
of
a
our
frenemy.
friends. Yeah. One of our friends sends me a video about identity. And so it's just been this domino effect where everything seems to be talking about identity, and as it relates to your internal conversations, your internal communications. And so I wanted to talk about it in a relational sense because I think that this is something that people often don't realize about their relationships. Oh, you're making me yawn. Um,
Sorry.
and what's so interesting about this is the identity that we assume can have a drastic effect for the good or for the bad on our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by this is, see, we were born with an identity. Basically who we're called to be by God, right? And a lot of people struggle throughout their life to figure out what that is. And they feel lost and we hear it all the time. And I tend to think that a lot of that is people being so caught up in the worldly stuff that they can't see it. But um, as we have things occur in our life, right? Whether you're talking about you growing up in a home in which maybe your parents were too much on the side of like, it's okay, we'll just talk about everything with no real consequences, right? Maybe you grew up in an abusive home. Maybe you experience events in your life or in your childhood that left these imprints on who you are and shaped who you are and who you were and who you grew up to be. And what happens is we create this um, operating system based on all of this stuff. And we actually end up forgetting what our identity is, right? And people will always say, well, this shaped me and da 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 da. Yeah, that's true. And you know, we talk about it all the time. God often uses um events and trials and tribulations to shape us into who we need to be. Because without those, we couldn't get there, right? It's like, think about a sculpture, right? And you're sculpting out of stone, right? When you're trying to get this perfect piece of art, you're not sitting there just rubbing it with your hand and shaping it, right? Like you're using a hammer and a chisel and you're chipping it away with force and impact, right? And y- when you do this, and then even when you get to the final stages, you might use an aggressive sandpaper, or an aggressive sanding, grinding tool, right? That's like taking chunks of this away as well. And this is much like our life, right? And we go through these trials and tribulations and experiences, and it chips away and it shapes this sculpture. But here's the struggle, right? And this is where I feel that most people really do have the hardest time. And that is in the sense that instead of seeing the sculpture that's being shaped out of this, we see the broken pieces that's laying on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we assume this identity of these broken pieces as opposed to this sculpture, right? And we do this where that becomes our identity. And then that's how we show up in our job, in our business, in our relationship, in our walk in faith, right? In our church, in the volunteer work that we do, in our hobbies, in our parenting. We show up as these broken pieces instead of the sculpture that was also chipped out. And people tend to forget that when these things happen, right? When you're sculpting, when God, because he's a master craftsman, right? And when he's sculpting this beautiful piece of art, there's two things that are left: the pile of rubble from all the chipping away and the grinding and all of that, and then the sculpture,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what happens is here's the interesting part. And one of our friends actually said this to me or they weren't talking directly to me, but we were in a group, and it might have been the men's group we were in. I don't recall exactly the setting, but it was this conversation of when that sculpture was created, right? And you started off with a giant brick of stone. The sculpture, the finished product, was always in that stone.
Mm-hmm.
From the very beginning, it was in that stone. And you had to chip away pieces to get to the end result, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what God does with us in our lives. But the challenge, like I said, is when we assume the identity of the broken pieces instead of the sculpture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because both were there since the very beginning. And what ends up happening is more often than not, what you see is this situation in which we assume the identity of the broken pieces,
Yeah.
right? And so I was thinking about this, and no matter how good we get, part of the work of the enemy, because he's also called the accuser, right? That's what he's referenced as.
Yeah.
And he will accuse you of being those broken pieces still,
Yeah.
right? And if we aren't, we either aren't currently fortified in our fortress enough, or maybe we're just going through a season, right, where we open the door and let him in. Then we start assuming that identity, right? And what I think about is a recent example from us where there was some stuff that you were struggling with that didn't have it somewhat had to do with us, but it really didn't, right? And it was a place you were supposed to be going. You ended up not going on the trip, and you were feeling bad about it. And by you not going on this trip, it triggered this identity this false identity that you've assumed in the past of I'm not good enough, right? And for a brief period, and it was only a couple of days, right? And this is what I love about our relationship is we might go through a couple of days, of being off, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's the real raw part about relationships, right? Is anybody that tells you it's great all the time, they're lying,
Yeah.
right? And they probably have so many issues that they're just turning a blind eye and they're just lying to themselves at that point. But you and I were able to we've talked about it before on the podcast. We tend to take showers together, and I would say 90% of the time, they're not of a sexual nature. Like it is a way that you and I actually connect. We're raw and real with each other, and it's very intimate without the sexual side, right?
Yeah.
And so this happened to be one of those situations where we were, and we ended up talking about what was going on and actually worked through that situation together. But what I thought about is for those 24 to 48-hour window, what ended up happening is the I'm not good enough. I didn't do enough. I didn't work hard enough. These like things that we tell ourselves ended up infecting your identity like a virus. And it became this like you started doubting yourself as a wife. You started doubting yourself as a parent. All of these things stemming from something that really wasn't related to any of that other stuff.
Yeah.
And what I think about so often is because you and I have gotten to a place where we can communicate, we can talk about these things, we can tell when something's off, and actually we have the ability to work through it together, right? Because I feel that you and I will tend to let each other be for about 24 to 48 hours to see if it's okay. Maybe they're just having a little off day or something, whatever.
Yeah.
And But then if it goes much past that, we both have this ability to actually kind of engage, push, kind of extract it out of each other and then work through it. But what it got me thinking with all this identity stuff and then this situation with us was the fact that if you someone isn't in a good place, right? Like if you're not in a good place in your relationship to where you have that ability that we've built up through the years of practice, right? It it can be a real challenge to actually deal with that. And what happens, and I can see it over and over in these patterns inside of relationships, is we allow that identity virus of the false identity to infect us. And the enemy uses it to attack us. And it becomes the identity we assume, right?
Yeah.
And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that we stop showing up as a spouse. We stop showing up as a parent. We stop showing up as the person that we're called to be, right? And we start showing up as that pile of rubble instead of the sculpture,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the crazy thing is, both of them are from the same stone,
Yeah.
but we're choosing to identify with the pile of rubble, right? And how often do we do that? And how often is it that you see inside of a relationship when things aren't great, or maybe there's something that's occurred inside of the relationship? Maybe it's something from childhood. Maybe it's something from not our childhood, but the past. Could be a professional setting. It could be a past relationship, could be, whatever.
Yeah.
Something has happened that has created a situation in which we're assuming this identity over here and we're letting that person show up inside of our relationship. And it says, I'm not good enough, right? And then you put off the vibe when it's the man. It's typically like a very needy, putting her on a pedestal, like that type of energy, which turns her off and pushes her away, right? When it's the woman, it tends to be other signs, right? And maybe you can speak to how that shows up more for like you, right? But we stop showing up in our full selves. And what's crazy is it's not even the fact that we aren't that person. It's the fact that we're choosing to run a program, and sometimes unknowingly, right? And I
Yeah.
would say a lot of times actually unknowingly,
Yeah.
but it's still a choice that we're running this program of this identity of the pile of rubble. And that program, that operating system that we're choosing to run is showing up outwardly, right? Because
Mm.
it's not the actions that create who you are. It's the identity that you assume, the conversation that you have with yourself that creates that identity that then creates the outward actions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how often do we see this inside of relationships where we've allowed our past to run a program based on the conversation that we keep telling ourselves, to where we're identifying with that pile of rubble instead of the sculpture.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. Just like I just keep thinking it's funny that we like look at the pile of rubble instead of looking in the mirror and seeing the sculpture and choosing to like realize that's who we are and not that pile of rubble. But I went to a women's group thing tonight and they were kind of talking about um like going through seasons and also like how the one of the enemy's like greatest lies that he implants into us is that we're alone or like we're the only one going through something. and like plants that seed in your head,
Mhm.
which I think is then why you pick up the identity of the rebel, right? Because you're like, oh, all of those rocks or, whatever. And that's me. And I'm the only one that has that pile of rocks,
Yeah.
but not realizing that like everyone has that pile of rocks, but you also have the statue, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, we kind of broke off and into groups and kind of talked about that a little. And um, not the statue thing, but talking about like feeling that alone feeling and how it's like something that the enemy um implants into our brain. And that got me thinking about how really, like you were talking about with our relationship now, being able to come to you and talk to you about things and us like work on them together, is that like in so many relationships that's not occurring.
Right.
um and either the husband or the wife or both feel like they can't go to each other to talk about these things, to work through them together so that you don't feel alone and you don't feel like you're the only one going through something, and I think that separates and isolates you in your relationship,
Yeah.
right? And then you are just assuming that identity of all of those things, because when I retreat back into that, like when I start assuming those identities of the, pile of rubble, it's because I am not communicating with you. It's because I retreat into my own little world and I think, oh, I can't talk to you about these things. But then when I do talk to you about these things and we worked through them together, then I remember like, oh, I have this statue, like this
Mhm.
sculpture,
Yeah.
and that's my identity. I don't know. That is actually like,
Got your brain going now, huh?
yeah.
This is one of those times where I didn't really tell Amber what we were going to talk about. She just said, "Hey, let's do a podcast. What are we going to talk about?" I said, "Identity." And she said, "What about?" And I said, "In a relationship." That's all she got.
Yeah.
So
He didn't give me any context.
it's interesting though. And that's why, that's why I said the thing about when people try to say that their relationship is perfect all the time, they're lying. And here's the thing, it may not be, geez Louise, my verbiage is all jacked up tonight. Um, an actual facetious, like intentional, I'm gonna be deceitful. Um, it very well could be that, they've built up a lie that they're telling themselves to protect themselves from being hurt or other things, right? But the reality is that the enemy will implant these things, right? And that's why I said, like, when you were just talking about, like, even us, right? Like, are we perfect at communication? No. Are we good at it? Most of the time, yeah, I would say 85 to 90%, we have very effective communication that we can truly make each other feel heard and truly resolve the issue, and also add more bricks to our foundation to continue to make progress on things in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And but the reality is like you just said it, right? Is like the enemy will implant these things in your head and make you think that you're all alone, right? And then sometimes you will struggle to communicate with me, not even because I've made you feel like you can't communicate, not because I make you feel unheard, right?
Yeah.
Not because I've done all these things to like make it feel like you can't ever talk to me inside of our relationship, right?
No, that stuff comes from past, which is part of that identity of rebel on the
Right.
floor.
Right. But that's exactly it, is like the accuser is going to accuse you of, hey, these pieces that God has chipped away, that's your identity, right? And he's going to try and convince you that you have to glue them back together in a specific order to become the sculpture when God has already sculpted the sculpture, right?
Yeah.
And it may very well may still be a work in progress. In fact, it is in all of us, right?
Yeah.
But what's for sure a fact is we are not the pile of rubble.
Yeah. We should leave that on the floor, huh?
Right. Right. And so but
Stop
that's
trying to pick it up and put it back together.
exactly. And that's the point though, is that, you know, when we identify with that, right? Like the enemy is going to continue to accuse us of things, trying to get us to have this false identity, right? And
Hmm.
that's why I've called it what I've called it. And it can be hard for people to actually examine that, right? Because as humans, we don't want to feel like we're a liar. We don't want to feel like we're a deceitful person, right? It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so as humans, uh, and I know there's going to be the people that throw out the whole narcissist thing, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, right? That is a real thing. It is a lot more rare than people make it out to be nowadays. It's one of those labels that we throw on everything when somebody does something we don't like. Um, it is a real thing. It does happen. E- Everybody actually has a level of it to a certain extent within us. And so we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, right? In general, people don't want to be a liar. They don't want to be told that they're lying, right?
Yeah.
But the trouble is that we lie to ourselves, right? And we actually will build up a false identity based on the lies that we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
right? So, for example, um, you have, in the past experienced a situation where you couldn't communicate with your partner and you were shut down, invalidated, not heard, all the things, right? Repeatedly over and over
Yeah.
to where you felt like you just can't communicate, right? So the lie that you're telling yourself now is you are alone with your emotions. And
Yeah.
even though it has been years of repairing going the opposite direction at this point, it's still a situation where you have built an identity that is a lie that says I'm alone with my emotions, right?
Yeah.
And what other ways, right? I want people to really think about that. What lies have you told yourself to build up the identity of who you are that you refuse to acknowledge as a lie because, well, we can't be a liar, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that is exactly what it is, right? And we all do it.
Yeah.
I've done it, right? Like, um, we've talked about this before, right? For a long time, I've dealt with the validation thing where I'm not the like I'm not good enough or I'm not lovable lie,
Yeah.
right? And then we tell ourselves that over and over and over. And then we show up in our relationship like that,
Hmm.
right? And it can be I'm alone. Maybe it's physically, maybe it's emotionally, you know, um, I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable, right?
Yeah.
And you think about all these things. And here's the reality, right? In many cases, yes, it can be a struggle, for example, to communicate with your partner, right? If you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you have a communication issue with your partner, or, right, you're just trying to improve it, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that even if a large portion of the communication breakdown is our partner's inability to hear what we're trying to say, there is still a level of a lie that you're telling yourself about your identity that creates the self-fulfilling prophecy where you say, I'm alone with my emotions. So even if you think you are communicating to your partner that is not hearing, you are not communicating in the way that you think. You are not communicating in a way that could be heard, even if they were open to it.
Yeah.
Right. And you may very well feel like you are, but the reality is you're not, because keep in mind, your identity is going to create the outward actions, not the other way around, right? The seed produces the tree, which produces the fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we see the seed once it's in the ground? No. Do we see the roots once they're in the ground? No. We see the tree and we see the fruit, right?
Yeah.
So the seed and the roots are our identity. Okay. And we're told constantly by society that, well, if you create enough fruit, then you have the seed and the roots. No, you have the seed and the roots.
Yeah.
If you identify that way, if that's the conversation you're having with yourself, if that's what you're telling yourself, and if it is, you will produce the fruit, right? And so when we're talking about these different ways of like us showing up in a way to be loved, right? And be open to being loved, right? If we're telling ourselves that we're not lovable or we're not good enough, we're going to show up in a way that makes us not good enough, that makes us not lovable, right? If we're alone with our emotions, we're going to show up in a way that our partner can't understand the emotions we're trying to express.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because on the way home, I was thinking about, um, so I had mentioned like when we were talking in our groups at the stuff earlier, um, like someone asked me um, how I release emotion. And my answer was like, a lot of times I just finally come to you and let it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, like confess what's going on in my internal world to you. And I was like, but I know that that can be hard if you're not in a good place in your relationships, right? Um, but anyways, on the way home, I was thinking about how like you're my best freaking friend, and like I'm so thankful that I can do that, and that I like ridiculously love you. So it's funny like to think about things like how we tell ourselves certain stories, but then like, you know, you might be telling or have previously had the thought of like, I'm not lovable or
Mm-hmm.
I can't be loved type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, I'm like, no, like I love the heck out of that person, you know? So, anyways, I just think that that's obviously another way that our identities are like used against us. Um, is that like telling yourself those things? But oftentimes, like I feel like your partner probably thinks the opposite of what you're actually telling yourself,
Yeah.
you know? But we're in that isolation mode of thinking, you know, that's just who I am, not realizing that that's not actually the case.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a lot to unpack, right? And the reality is that, we continue to create these false identities within ourselves, and our brain is going to look for the evidence, right, of whatever we tell it. So when we tell it these things, it's, you could do, let's say, let's go back to the communication thing, right? And your emotions. And 9 times out of 10, you could communicate your emotions, you could, be heard and validated and all the stuff and everything that is good about that situation. But if you're telling yourself that you're alone in your emotions, your brain is going to default to that one time out of 10, and it's going to constantly run that on replay
Mhm.
and make it this situation where you can't see the other 9 times.
Yeah, I would say that, like, even I still struggle with that at times, like, I almost have to force myself to actually communicate with you, um, because and it's not even that I, like, internally think about that process that often, like, it's really not that I tell myself, like, "You're not going to listen," or "You're not going to, um" hear me or validate me or any of those things. It's just it's been the thought in my brain for so many years that it's the default setting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you're running that operating system. It's the story you're telling yourself.
Well, and that like I really don't tell myself that anymore. It's just the story that's still there.
Mhm.
It's a piece that I picked up at one point and I just haven't put back down, which is like really when you think about uh, I was gonna go like I don't know. My brain went off in a tangent there and then stopped.
Well, and that's exactly it though, is what I would say is that you've told yourself that story so long previously that it's on autopilot now.
Yeah,
And we do that to ourselves, right? But that's exactly the perfect example of what I'm talking about in these false identities that we've built up, right?
mhm,
And we've identified as the pile of rubble for so long that we don't even see the sculpture sitting right next to it,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
and and so we run and then we end up running on autopilot. And the thing is you can make the change, right? But it's a conscious effort to tell yourself a different story, to continue to choose the other operating system. And then what happens is over time, you reprogram that
right.
to actually run a different operating system.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say is like I do have to like force myself to talk to you now,
Mhm.
but it's a lot easier for me to do it now than it used to be,
Right,
right? Like I still have times that yes, I like actually have to force myself to do it, but more often than not, I also just talk to you about things and it's not like
right,
whatever. So it has been reprogrammed over time, but me just sitting here processing things. This is why my brain keeps like stopping when I have
yeah,
a thought process is like I'm actually like processing things and like, oh shoot, like I do that and I need to just let that go and put it back down because it's not mine to carry.
yeah.
Yeah. This is one of those times that we're having a conversation again and like it's my own personal therapy session.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, we're gonna leave it there for now because I want people to unpack that. Like, if they listen to what we just said, there's gonna be a lot of unpacking to do. I would highly encourage you to, like, journal, write down, um, some sort of way, put on paper, actually examining these operating systems, these false identities that you've given yourself over the years. Um, but with that being said, we always try to leave you with an action. And that action is going to actually be to share this episode with 3 people. That is your challenge. It can be a parent, it can be your friends, it can be your family, it can be your siblings, it can be a coworker, whatever it is. right? Share it with 3 people that you know that are in a relationship. Married, not married, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You should do that for sure.
Yeah. All right. On that note, guys, we will talk to you next time. We had mentioned this before. If you listen to our last episode, we're actually running through. We have a year-long couples workshop / Bible study that is free inside of our school community, Covenant Couples, and anyways, we are doing that on Mondays now. So our Monday release, you will actually we'll go through week by week. If you miss a week, you can always go back to our previous podcast. So that is what you get to look forward to on the upcoming Monday. But other than that, like I said, go share this podcast with 3 other people, and we will talk to you guys next time.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.